Lab 4, check. Check 1, check 2. Check, check. Check 1, check 2, check 3. Lab 4, check 1, check 2. Podium mic, check 1, check 2, check 3. Handheld, check 1, check 2. Handheld 2, check 1, check 2.
You want to drive or you want me to?
I'm gonna wait for a boost. Is this on? Good afternoon. If I could ask for your attention, we're going to get started in just a minute here. Thanks to everyone for coming out this afternoon. For those who haven't met me before, I'm Naraya Brodus from the Office of the President, and welcome to Moving Dartmouth Forward. If you've been to one of these before, you already know the way we run this. Our goal here is really to have an exchange. So Alan Cattier and Josh Kim are here to tell you a little bit about what we currently have underway around learning technologies and digital learning. And then they have some questions for you and want to invite your feedback, suggestions, and ideas. At the end of the session, I'll share with you some of the sessions we have coming up in this series and invite your participation through Improve Dartmouth and our website. And with that, I'll turn it over to Alan and Josh.
Great. Can everyone hear okay? So I'm going to kick us off. And just first, are there any students here? Any students come? Graduate student. Almost any other students? All right, that's all right. Maybe some students will come. So very quickly, Alan and I, we have about 10, 15 minutes of presentation to do. We're going to run through it really quickly. And a couple ground rules as we're doing the presentation. Please, ask questions, interrupt, argue with us. All those things are really good. We start out with 4 questions. The questions were somewhat directed at students, so maybe kind of pretend you're an undergraduate student. That would be awesome, and we'll try to do that. So we're going to show you the questions first, and then we'll have those questions to guide us. Since there seems to be less or almost no students, we might kind of switch around the questions and the discussion. So did everyone get those kind of ground? You're going to have to talk. Everyone got that? All right.
So Josh introduced some questions. I want to introduce some premises and give you a little bit of the foundation from which our strategy is moving forward. I'm Alan Cattier. I'm the Associate CIO for Academic and Client Computing. I'm also a Dartmouth grad, class of 1986. And one of the things that was really important for us to contextualize as we started out thinking about learning technologies was how much of a leader Dartmouth already is in this space. I think many of you know that Dartmouth is already, for 5 years running, #1 in U.S. News and World Report for commitment to teaching. And for Josh and I, it was really important to ask the question, what does leadership look like, for instance, in 2020 or 2025 going forward? And so this is where the vision comes from, extending our leadership in education, not only maintaining it, but extending it by building a culture of engagement, active and experiential learning in every class. So for those of you who wanted to hear very discreetly about all the whiz-bang technologies, that's not so much about what today's presentation is about. Our focus on learning technologies is really about the commitment to the learner. And I'll talk a little bit more about that going forward.
Okay, so we put these questions for you guys to think about as we're doing this 10-minute kind of run through. I'll give you a moment to let you look at those questions, and then we'll actually talk about if these are the right questions given who you guys are. Okay, everyone have a chance to read those. So even if you're not reading those and we're not discussing those so much from a student perspective, I think it gives you a good level set of where our heads are. Is that as we're thinking about technology, we're really thinking about technology from the learner's perspective. And we really think that everything we're doing here is about learning. And technology is very much the least interesting part of the story. Technology is a bridge to where we want to go with how we see the best type of learning that can happen at Dartmouth College. So keep in mind these questions, and we'll maybe go for some other ones given who you guys are.
So a quick history quiz for everyone here. Does anyone know what 50th anniversary Dartmouth is celebrating in May? Basic, exactly. One of the really unexplored trajectories of Dartmouth's history is how central Dartmouth has been as a leader in higher education, exploring this area which we're going to call the intersection of technology and the liberal arts. Now, I'm sure many of you thinking of MIT and Caltech as really interesting places, but they weren't really the places that were pioneers in terms of liberal arts. Now, if you think about Dartmouth, and especially the 50th anniversary of BASIC, and that vision of computing across the curriculum that was so much a part of Dartmouth in the 60s and the 70s, Dartmouth really has been a leader in this space, starting with timeshare and BASIC, computing across the curriculum. We were one of the first campuses wired, providing all students the capacity to participate on the network. I was here in 1984. I'd been here 2 years when Dartmouth committed to the PC initiative. I typed my first 2 years on a typewriter. I word processed my last 2 years on a Mac. It changed my life. I mean, I was an English major. I wasn't someone in CS. Dartmouth's outreach to everyone, to all students. That was part of what, for me, was unique in the Dartmouth experience. And then in the 90s, moving into 2000, we were the first Ivy League campus that was, in fact, wireless covered. So we have been a leader, really, for 50 years running at this intersection of technology and the liberal arts. And for Josh and I, it became really, really important to ask the question, as we were intimating, 2020, 2025, what does it mean to be a leader at that point in time? What does it look like to have ownership of that space? And for us, we're calling it the learner's moment. It's about a focus and a concentration on the education we provide our students based on the technology that we can deploy on their behalf to provide them the singular, most active, engaging learning environment that we possibly can.
Okay, all this slide says is that we've been doing some things incredibly right? We're #1 in teaching and learning amongst national universities for 5 years running. And that's an amazing place to start. Now why are we #1? What is really the special sauce at Dartmouth? Well, what's so great about here is that we have the professors who are writing the books, right? Professors are writing the books, the top researchers, thought leaders in their field. And then they're coming and teaching our students in a way that they actually get to know the students as individuals in these small type of intimate settings. This is a real differentiator for Dartmouth College. Other places can't match these ambitions of a university, but the scale and the culture of a college. And that's what makes us so special. So we're starting from this great position. The question we have is how can we leverage technology to remove any barriers to the kind of relationships that we believe can happen between our faculty and our students? How can we remove any barriers so our classrooms feel like seminars and all of our classrooms? So this slide is just intended to say we're starting from a great place, but we have a lot of responsibility, right? All of us in this room, we don't want to be the ones who in 2020 look back and we fell off. So I think all of us really feel this responsibility. Okay, so how are we going to do this? So we've kind of talked about some big ideas. And again, I want to come back to this big idea is that we want to try to set up an ecosystem, an environment, supports, so that students in every single class get the experience that we think characterizes Dartmouth. And that's the ability to work closely with our knowledge-producing faculty, to work with them to help produce knowledge. So that's what we're going for, right? We're trying to do this in every class. So the question is, how do we get there? So we're going to talk about some specific initiatives that we think will help us get to these larger goals, what we're calling the learner's moment. The first concrete thing that we're going to talk about is edX, is open online education. Does everyone here know about edX and open online? Just very, very briefly, edX is a not-for-profit consortium that contains 30 other peer institutions, and the consortium is dedicated to providing free online classes for lifelong learners. And that's wonderful. That's part of the college's mission, to be part of contributing to the open education movement and to sharing our education with lifelong learners. But that's not the main reason why we joined edX. At Dartmouth, we really took our time in thinking about where we wanted to be with the open online education movement. And joining edX came out of a faculty-led committee where they said this is the group of folks. edX, as a consortia, their priorities are to improve education on campus, to improve residential education, and to improve education with research. So they have these two priorities which are very close to what we believe here. So as Dartmouth, as we move forward with launching our first edX courses, and we'll launch our first 1 or 2 in the fall, and we'll have 4 going out this year. And right now, faculty are submitting proposals who would like to do this. Our main focus will be, how can we take what we learn with building our edX courses and bring them back to the classroom? And there's some very specific ways that we think we'll learn a great deal. One of the ways is that to build an edX course, you have to put together a project team. And that project team includes folks from Alan's group, from academic computing. It includes a librarian, and the librarian works to help with the faculty to help find open education materials and help set up the assignments. The team will include someone from DCAL, the Dartmouth Center for the Advancement of Learning, as we have this team approach to work with the faculty. And we think that developing this sort of team approach will be very, very useful as we apply what we learn to the residential face-to-face classes. We also think we'll develop some other things. To create these edX classes, you need to create some educational objects, some educational media that you can then take and plug in to our residential classes. Now, our Dartmouth students will not take edX courses. None of our edX courses will be for credit. But what we do hope is the systems that we build to do edX, what we learn, the infrastructure that we build, will have enormous benefits in terms of how we construct our local classes, our residential classes, particularly our larger classes. And Alan will talk a little bit more about the role of analytics and data in that in a bit.
Well, actually, I'll make an observation about research and analytics right here, which is to say, if you looked at many of the MOOC classes, they have anywhere between 15,000 and 120,000 students participating in a course. Now, those are very large numbers, and when we're aligning with the research mission with edX, that becomes an incredibly compelling data set to work with, particularly as we look across all of the edX institutions, to look very specifically at what are successful learning strategies, what is working in terms of some of these distributed environments, what's not working. So when we have this data available to us, we're looking to bring that information home to help us hone our own excellence here in Hanover.
So before we go to Canvas, I just want to ask, I wanted to have a little break here. Does anyone have any questions? I mean, you must have questions about edX, why we're doing it, what it's going to mean, what it means for you.
Why edX and not Coursera?
Okay, so edX is the question is why edX and not Coursera? So edX, we felt like as a consortium really fit our values. It's not for profit. It has 30 other peer institutions, and all of these other institutions are really asking the same questions. What can we do to invest in teaching and learning going forward, right? And since it's a not-for-profit consortium of peers, it's a group that is dedicated to sharing what we've learned. So that means sharing anonymized data, right? And also sharing best practices. So we thought that, culturally, it was a really good fit. And Bob told us we should do edX. So the lawyer says. Okay. Yep.
So it's not about edX per se, but I'm actually questioning your original assertion, which is that technology, the need for technology to help remove some of the barriers to our current classroom teaching environment.
Right.
We are ranked number one in that teaching-focused experience, and I guess I'm questioning what are the barriers that you're trying to identify that you think technology can address, and I just wonder if that's a flawed argument to begin with.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. It's exactly what you should be asking. Like, if we're number one, why do we need to do everything? Why didn't we need to do anything? And I'll say a couple things to that. One is that the college, like every institution, we have some larger classes, right? We have some classes which are not seminars, right? And there's always a challenge in these larger classes that how do you make the larger class really feel like the seminar, right? We have some amazing lecturers, and we still want students to have that experience, but we also want students, and President Hanlon has talked about that in every class we're going to have active learning and we're going to have engaged learning in every class, experiential learning. Students are going to learn by doing stuff, right? So part of what we're hoping to do is to look across our curriculum and say, are there instances where maybe we can make investments, put a team approach, so that class is really as active and experiential for all the students as possible. So I think that's kind of the first thing. And also, it's an opportunity to say, look, we care about teaching. We're going to invest resources and people into teaching. We don't know where that's going to go, right? We don't really know, but we're going to do some experimenting. And do you want to
I would just add, we also are thinking that this is a moving target, right? That if you looked at how content that's actually going to be used in classes is going to develop, if you look at the impact of analytics as it's going to be influencing the classroom, and if you look at the overall experience of the learner, particularly in light of how brain science, cognitive study is starting to really map out how the learner learns, those three things are going to start changing what it means to be in a classroom. And I think a lot of schools are targeting this area very specifically to distinguish themselves, taking a look at Dartmouth being number one, saying, how are we going to take the mantle now going forward?
So I may have made a step too far in my, but I took your question about barriers to imply that what you're trying to eliminate are any barriers to the best of faculty mentorship, of what you get in individual mentorship in those really small groups with faculty or in the office. Is that what you're trying to
I think that's really well said. I mean, partly we're trying to create conditions for this kind of discussion so that these kind of ideas can come out and circulate, and we can work on these together, and that you can have allies to help you with that. So I hadn't heard it said that way. I think it sounds really great.
What's the longer-term trajectory for edX at Dartmouth? So 4 courses the first year. What's the thinking going forward, or is there any thinking yet?
It's a really good. So the question is, what is the trajectory for edX going forward? I mean, I think what we can't overestimate enough is that we're in an experimental time. It's really exciting, right? We get to create things, we get to learn, we get to play, we get to do this on our own terms. Now, what's great about edX is Dartmouth is not going into this to try to make money, right? We don't think that this is a money maker thing. Other institutions have tried to look, maybe open online education will be a way to make money or save costs. We're doing this purely to learn, as a laboratory to learn. So we expect that our experiment will be a success. We'll learn lots of things, and we'll keep doing this and keep offering more courses. But this is an experiment. That's what's kind of exciting about it.
Josh, this is just a quick question. You mentioned that the Dartmouth residential classrooms is going to be completely separate from the MOOC. Is that like an absolute firewall? Because it seems to me that the residential students could potentially benefit enormously
Right.
from the really, effective sort of high-impact technological objects or learning objects that might be developed.
I think you're exactly right. So let me say how we think it's going to go. What our students will not do is take courses on the edX platform for credit. So what we expect is that the learning objects, the media, the assessments that we develop, we'll pull those out as modules and have them available to put in Canvas. And the faculty will have a team of folks, learning designers, who will help them do that. It also may be so that our Dartmouth students or prospective students or alumni will also look at these courses about the best we have to offer. So just to be very clear that we think that our residential technology here at Canvas is really optimized for the Dartmouth experience that we want to have here, and we're not doing that on the edX platform. Other questions about edX before we go on? Really, people have so many questions when we talk about this stuff. But, all right, if you have more, or if you want to do what Anthony did, which is great, which is kind of question the premises, keep doing that as we go. That was awesome.
So many of you probably know that we're in the midst of a massive migration from our kind of legacy learning management system, Blackboard, to our new learning management system, Canvas. And at one remove, you would look at that as a technical migration. And just wearing my IT hat, that is in fact one way that I look at the project. But there's a very different way that I look at the project as well. And that is because in this particular instance, the migration that we're doing into Canvas is a mechanism now of introducing a new role across to every single faculty member in Dartmouth College. And this new role is the instructional designer. And you might ask, what does an instructional designer do? Well, what an instructional designer does is they tailor pedagogical strategies to teaching moments. They basically provide the best strategies going forward for bringing material online. So we've had limited opportunities to deploy this before because of the fact that we had more limited staffing. We have 4 instructional designers now, and we are reaching out to every single class in the college. And we are having a discussion about the best strategies going forward, bringing content online for faculty who are in fact starting to teach in Canvas. So there is a comprehensiveness and a breadth to this vision, which we've never kind of aspired to before. It also means that the reach of what we're doing, it really has a kind of a cultural effect, right? This conversation that's going on about what really works online is something that everyone is having. And it's not only happening between IT folks and faculty, it's a conversation that is percolating faculty to faculty. So we're hoping as we advance the Canvas agenda, we're building out essentially this ecosystem where, as the title says, we're having both a spirit of kind of experimental, let's try things, let's see what really works going online, because technology is a moving target. There are new forms of learning objects, there are new strategies to visualize, there are new ways to bring data into an online environment every year. That's always a moving target. And how do we do it systemically? How do we do it such that we're taking Dartmouth on this particular journey, and we're bringing Dartmouth to the point of ongoing leadership as we're deploying more and more content to engage our students?
Can you just talk a little more about Canvas as I kind of gather what you're saying as a way to extend the conversation outside of the classroom for the students as well as the professor, and maybe how does that happen? Is that what it is, and then how does that happen?
At this point in time, it's really the breadth of the migration, which is to say that we are literally 3 months formally into our migration. Already half of Dartmouth students are in Canvas. So the hope is that we're providing them a better learning environment. So maybe if I could give you one quick example. We have one faculty member who had a very particular need. And that particular need was to be able to annotate YouTube videos in her class. This particular class, that was the interactivity that the instructional designer and the faculty member felt could really make the difference. Now, if we were in the Blackboard world 1 year ago, here's what would have happened. We would have had to test that particular functionality once we found it. We would have to assure ourselves that that functionality did not basically interfere with the operation of any other course. And we would have needed to wait to introduce that technology until we had a window when we could afford to bring the system down. What happened in this particular instance is, because of the way Canvas is designed, it's very modern in terms of its architecture, we were able to introduce it, install it, deploy it within 2 days of having discovered that functionality. So it's that kind of agile response to things that students are really going to feel make a difference in terms of learning success, actually building for the learning outcome, that we hope will be something that will be repeated for many of our courses.
What was, you're building on from Blackboard, what was its penetration before? How many courses used it? How many students?
Well, it's difficult to say how many used it, because the way Dartmouth's Blackboard architecture was developed, we had literally every Blackboard course since 1998 on this one server. So at any one semester, I would think there were, Barbara, help me out here.
75 to 80% of face-to-face courses use Blackboard in some way.
What were the reasons for the resistance to that, and how will Canvas overcome those?
Well, I mean, part of it is the example which I just offered, which is it ended up being a very monolithic way of introducing innovation into classes. We had to take all types of considerations for the overall environment in order to put anything innovative into a class. All of a sudden, because Canvas is architected differently, we could be much more agile in the way we respond to faculty in terms of saying, here's a very discrete learning object that will fit in with your class. We're going to put it in your class. We don't have to worry about whether or not it's going to threaten the stability of the overall environment. And again, it turns around so much more quickly than we ever would have been able to do with Blackboard.
What is Canvas's penetration in the post-secondary marketplace?
Barbara? The penetration in the secondary into the higher ed market?
They have about 400 schools using it. I don't know how it translates percentage-wise. I would think it's probably between 7 and 10%. And trending upwards pretty steeply.
And Blackboard is trending downward at the moment. Flipped classes?
All right, flipped classes, redesigning large courses to feel like seminars, gateway course initiatives. This is one of my favorite new initiatives that we've got going. My background is teaching college. I used to teach sociology and demography, not so much here, other places. And I would teach really, really big classes. And I wasn't that great a lecturer. I was okay, and I always wondered, wow, how could we make these classes better? Well, here at Dartmouth, we're lucky, right? Because we don't have really, really big classes. We have some classes of 40, 50, or 60, and we have amazing faculty, right, to start with. So we're starting at this incredible place. So what this initiative is about is that we'll be going out to faculty and going out to departments and trying to partner with our faculty who say, look, I've been doing this class, this larger class, this introductory class, and a gateway class is usually the prereqs, you need to get so you can go and major in that discipline. And the faculty will say, I'd really like to do some other stuff. It's been working great, but I think maybe there's a way that I can get the students moving more and actually getting hands on stuff, but I don't quite know how to do it. I have all this material to cover, and I have 60 students. With this initiative, what we're hoping to do is set up an infrastructure and resources so we can bring a team to that faculty member and bring resources to that faculty member as she tries to reinvent or redesign her course. So how does that redesign look like? Well, it's in different places have done it in different ways. One way to do it is to realize that our terms are really, really short. And our faculty don't have a lot of time to spend with our students. 10 weeks is not a lot of time. And so that classroom time is really precious. So if you're going to spend time together in a space, you want to maximize what you can do in that time. You want to maximize engagement. You want to maximize conversation. You want to maximize discussion. And so maybe there's ways to take some of that content that you normally have to cover in an introductory class and put it online so the students can watch shorter modules before coming to class, and then the faculty can go and synthesize and hit the high points, and then have exercises where the students do some interesting things to try to apply that learning. So we're going to be doing this systematically. We think we have a great base to build on. It's going to be based on what faculty want to do, right? There's no top-down thing going here. It's very much working with faculty to help them realize their vision for their larger classes. Are there any questions about? Yes.
Josh, I'm not an educator, but when I look at what you have up on the board there, to me, to make a large course feel like a seminar implies discussion. Mm-hmm. And I have a hard time envisioning how that can really be done well with 40, 50, or 60 people. Does this also include the notion of breaking these up into smaller discussion groups?
It's a great point, and what you bring up, it's really hard to do, right? It's really hard to do to make a 40 or 50 person class feel like a 12-person class. That might be one of the answers, that if you feel like you're confident that you can cover the material and assess it well, maybe you can break folks up and actually have them do stuff. And maybe that's one of the ways. I don't think we quite know the answers to that, but I think we know that the only way we're going to get to that answer is if we bring this team approach to teaching. If we bring the faculty member and we pair her with a learning designer and a librarian and a media specialist, and you all sit down and try to puzzle this out together and do it over time with sustained investments. If this was easy, everyone would be doing it, but we're doing it because it's hard, right? That's why we want to do it. It's a good question.
Okay. And I would also add that, our presentation is about readiness, right? It's about identifying the learner's moment as something that's going to be incredibly significant over the next 10 or 15 years. And we're hoping to build this into Dartmouth's DNA. We're hoping that these questions, which we're planning now, become part of an ongoing dialogue as to how we keep the interest of the learner at the forefront of who we are going forward. And that's why we're taking this systemic approach, trying to build in as many places as we can opportunities to engage a difficult question like the one you offered. How do we really take discussion and make it real in class of 40 or 50? To say nothing of 160 or 180, but then other questions, which are akin to how do we make our environment, our learning environments, really suit the learner's interests, because that fundamentally hasn't been at the top of the agenda up to this point in time in terms of certain aspects of the way, for instance, classrooms are designed. So I think my next bullet speaks to that, which is we're hopefully moving to a place where we can start having discussions about classrooms of the future and what, in fact, rooms that support active, engaged learning look like. We know that they're probably very group-friendly, they're very agile, they're adaptable, they're movable, but beyond that, how do they incorporate maybe some of these new learning environments, these virtual environments, which we know will be part of learning in 5 years, for instance? There are beautiful classrooms on this campus. I in fact, sat in many of them, but they are probably not the type of configurations that support the kind of active learning that we're going to need to foster going forward. So part of the agenda here is really starting to think about the spaces in which we teach and learn. And then I think you all probably have heard some conversations around Khan Academy. Does everyone know what Khan Academy is? So Khan Academy, that's an interesting partner for Dartmouth, right? Khan Academy is this kind of groundbreaking initiative that Saul Khan developed on behalf of his nephew, training primary mathematics and offering these little online videos where his nephew could work through and really master content. And so there might be a question about what would Dartmouth's interest be in Saul Khan's work and in Khan Academy in general. Well, for any of you that might have kids that are using Khan Academy, or for any of you who have walked through, for instance, the personal finance tutorials that have subsequently come up for adults, these environments are incredibly compelling, and they are being used by millions of people. And so as you're thinking about, again, the opportunity of analytics, we've got edX, which is offering us this particular window on, let's say, 40,000 to maybe 100,000. Well, the world of Khan Academy is the world of millions of learners online working through content. And why is that so significant? It's so significant because it offers us an understanding of how people stumble, of how they excel, where they master, what are the patterns of learning that suggest they can move to mastery. Now, this isn't to suggest that analytics are kind of a wash that you push over every class and say it's appropriate to use here, but there's some clear elements of the way in which analytics are developing that suggest we can be so much smarter about the way our students move through our content, and we can help them at really critical points, not only remediation points where they may in fact be stumbling, but maybe points of excelling as well, where we say to them, you know what, you are at the threshold of really moving to the next level in this course. If you do the following, you will in fact get promoted into this next course. And I mean, that sounds like a trite example in terms of Khan Academy, but in terms of Dartmouth, it might be the moment in time where you identify a student who is a Rhodes Scholar if they, in fact, just did a certain number of activities or had a certain conversation on this campus. There's all kinds of science that's emerging from what is kind of, I think, enormously called big data that offer lessons for us about what the learner is going to look like going forward.
On the Classroom of the Future stuff, we have a number of classrooms that are these stacked, tiered auditoriums, and very large ones as well as small ones, but in that same kind of stacked way. Are we talking about redesigning those spaces, repurposing those spaces, or how do we get to some of these, that seminar feeling in a stacked tiered classroom with removable furniture, for example?
Well, I mean, for instance, Dartmouth 105, I don't think a classroom like that is ever going to change, because if you listen to our presentation, it's about suiting the right technology for engagement for the right location and the right teaching style. If there is a brilliant lecturer and that is the way that they engage their student, that is what our presentation is about. It's for those moments where engagement isn't working as well as it might, or the room doesn't support the teaching style. That's where we want to put the agenda of the learner forward and bring their interests to bear in, is the room well lit? Is it comfortable to use? Or is the furniture allow the type of group interaction that we want to foster? Is it in fact flexible enough such that the students can reconfigure it within a class period? Does the faculty member have too much of a burden in terms of stepping into the space and configuring it to their own use? I think it's a global agenda, again, the ecosystem, which we're trying to introduce at multiple points so that we really can comprehensively as a campus be thinking what it means to be a learner in some of our spaces.
Great. All right, so this last bullet point here, we're going to be looking at other opportunities for online and blended programs, degree and non-degree. We have our first graduate degree program, the Masters of Healthcare Delivery Science, a joint program between the business school and TDI. And what was great about the program is that we showed that we can deliver an education that is a Dartmouth education, which is really built around these close-knit relationships between faculty and students, this really high-quality, intimate experience, and we can extend some of that to what goes on online, right? So as we look at other programs that we might do for degree or non-degree, executive education, we're going to keep that model in mind, that our value proposition here is our faculty, the faculty who write the books, right? And the idea is, can you set up ways that learners can spend time with these faculty, maybe learners who can't move to Hanover for a year or 2 years or 3 years. So again, we're going to be looking at this and doing a little experimenting, and we're excited to be really aiming at that high level. So, you know, the thing that we're emphasizing, we're going to get you guys talking to me. I know some people have to leave. That's really not about the technology. The technology is a bridge. That's about focusing on the learner. So in the next couple of slides, and I hope we'll use these to jump off our discussions, we're just going to kind of show you about how we think that the model we have now, which has been great, right? It's got us to number one. We go back one. You know, that these are all classrooms at the college. And what I love about all these pictures is that it is our learners, our well-prepared learners, Paul brings in, thank you for bringing them in, working with our best in the world faculty, right? And in all of these, they're using technology to help. And in these classes, you know, we do, almost all of our classes, they are active. They do use technology, they're blended. We have team-based in terms of teams of students working together and often teams of faculty. And so many of our classes are experiential, where they're actually doing stuff. So we have this amazing base to build on. And then going forward, well, I'll let Alan talk about going forward, and then I'll jump in also. And then we'll hopefully get you guys to ask questions.
Lots of characteristics here that just speak to a much smarter learning environment around the learner. I don't think it's a real stretch to imagine in 10 years we will have our own personal agents that will be out there looking on the internet before we get up in the morning, searching for material that we're interested in. It'll be hand delivered right around breakfast time. It'll be the type of encounter where you take that information forward into your day. You need to contact people. Your intelligent agent, your personal virtual agent will be there for you. And for the student, there will be a similar animus where they'll be able to research, work with ever more sophisticated content in the library. They'll be fine-tuning their virtual agent. This particular vision is of sitting down with a computer like, for instance, IBM's Watson, and having it be part of your work group, right? Let's take all that computing power, that awareness of what's out there on the network, and make it part of our work group. Let's really see what it can do. The analytics, again, just how much we can tell our learners about when they're going to succeed steps they might take to take themselves to the next level, and ways in which they can master content. Flexibility, you heard me talk about that in terms of learning environments. Multisensory, imagine stepping into a learning environment where, in fact, you're studying the human body in a virtualized world, and you step into the cell that you're studying in terms of the Google glasses that you're wearing, and start manipulating and looking at, in fact, all the attributes of the cell that used to be on a textbook. It's a lot more dynamic learning than we ever have experienced. And this competency-driven, I think this is going to be an important attribute going forward, that there are going to be certain considerations that really drive learners to demonstrate mastery and to show that the learning outcome, the learning experience has been successful. So this is a little bit about the future of learning at Dartmouth. So we come back to our kind of questions for the audience, not the student audience that maybe we expected, but still, you all are obviously here because you're interested in engaged learning and interested in the future of the classroom and interested in Dartmouth's excellence in teaching.
Yeah, so maybe we'll kind of throw this, we have these questions, which again might not be exactly where you guys sit, but I'm really, so you've heard us talk about that it's not about technology, it's about focusing on the learner. And you've heard us talk about that whatever we do, technology is going to change. There's all sorts of exciting things happening. It's going to change quickly, but we're going to stick to our core values. That's the world's best faculty, working closely with our students, right? And we're going to try to integrate technology to improve that experience where appropriate, right? So you've heard about our big thrust about how we're doing this and the investments we're trying to make to bring teams of faculty and non-faculty educators together to focus on classes to hopefully create what the next generation of learning is. I think you've kind of got that. I think we'd be curious about, okay, is this resonating? Are there questions about this? Concerns? More ideas?
Is it compelling?
Yeah.
You don't want to get caught in the Dartmouth bubble, as brilliant as it is. We all, I have the greatest respect for what you're doing and having, for instance, edX coming out of a committee that included lots of faculty. Well, that's great. But I hear from people I speak to their concerns about, is Dartmouth, what's going on in this area, and that is, there are areas where you don't have plugins, or maybe you do, and I hope you have unofficial or official opportunities for consulting with people at the leading edges and a variety of expertise that is coming down the pipe.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. The way I think about that is where higher education is changing so much is that so many more of us need to be involved in improving the experience of the learner. That when I first started teaching, again, it was just that what they would do is they'd say, okay, you go to this classroom at this time, right? And maybe you got a little help from the person who helped set up the projector. But now we know that it's a lot more competitive environment. There's a lot more ways that people can learn, and many more ways they're trying to grab the student's attention. So for us to really succeed, all of us, I think really all of us in this room, need to be part of what what happens, how higher ed is changing, and how learning is improving. So I think, in this room, we have a lot of these connections. Like, we have a lot of networks. We know a lot of things. And the question will be, how do you make the conversation large enough that you can channel this incredible expertise that we have at the college to this very specific goal of the best possible learning? So I think that spreading this conversation out and having lots and lots of these conversations will be incredibly important going forward.
I think there's also another side to this, and that is, can we afford not to be having this conversation? And knowing that our competitors, or certainly a number of the schools who are below us currently on that U.S. and News and World Report commitment to teaching, they are looking at analytics. They are looking at a revolution in content. They are looking at cognitive studies and brain science and saying, you know what we've done in the past in our learning environments just hasn't been smart enough. We are going to go here and we are going to be smarter because we're going to target this area. So for Dartmouth, this is an important conversation to have. And we're hoping, as I characterized it earlier, it's a readiness, right? Shakespeare, the readiness is all in this particular moment. It's not like we're going to be able to come up with one investment in 2017 that's going to answer this. It's about a predisposition on the part of the institution, on the part of the faculty, to say we're optimizing our learning experience as a culture. And we're using the full scale of the ecosystem to reach out and stay abreast of what we can stay abreast of, and be smart about connecting, forming alliances in places where it's going to be strategic for us in the future.
One of the things you mentioned is competency driven. And I'm wondering if you expect then that to become competency-based graduation, and then looking at tools for evaluating, or that provide evidentiary support of competency across the curriculum that leads to graduation. And are we going to be looking at tools for that as well?
So I would say about this, that the competency-based education, it's a lot of talk in higher education circles, that what we've always done is held seat time constant and competencies variable, right? And can you reverse those, right? I think that we have a great model here at Dartmouth. I think our close-knit liberal arts community is a great model, and we have other concerns. We're here about leadership. We're here to create leaders, right? So where I think when we think about competency is we want to engage in those discussions and debates. We want to be part of those larger discussions. I think at the college we have some different concerns than a place down the road like SNHU. Yep.
Is primarily from the television world, networks, etc. So when Chris sends me into a 90-seat auditorium to grab something that can really become a learning experience for the students, I go in there with 3 cameras, microphones, with the idea of capturing the professor at the blackboard, the excitement between the student and the professor. We bring it back into post and we cut it so it's not a slow-moving piece, and yet it brings across exactly what the professor is looking for. In my world, we look at who is the audience. The second question is, what is the budget? And so going into the classrooms with 3 cameras, doing all of the post, one project at a time we may get away with, but when we have this as a constant, that gets fairly expensive when you look at the data storage, the cameras, and the team that has to make this move on. Because someday we will have animation in there, graphics, music perhaps, and all that costs money. And when you tell the professors what the budget is, you can see the meltdown. Where does the balance come to pay for them?
Right, I'll say a couple things about resources, maybe Alan will say a couple things. I mean, one, investing in learning, it is expensive, right? We are talking about making these investments. So there's a couple ways. One is that we're certainly part of the strategy we go out for philanthropy, to tell this story to our alumni. And our alumni get very excited about this because they remember this Dartmouth experience of working closely and creating knowledge with faculty. They've seen technology disrupt their industries, and they'd like to see Dartmouth move forward in a way that's consistent with our values, but leverages the new technologies available. So that's one way. The other way is, frankly, substitution. I mean, I think all of us have to figure out, okay, are there ways that we can transform what we're doing day to day to participate in this move towards putting more inputs and resources into the classroom and for learners? So I think this is a conversation we'll all be having, is how will we shift what we're doing towards this vision? And there's no magic bullet, as Alan was saying. It's really a culture that you have to create, that we're all going in the same direction. And I find that actually very exciting. Do you want to add?
I would just add that, I mean, I think we're also going to have to look at our learning environment and very specifically develop better ways of not only knowing what's out there that we can leverage, but also developing partnerships. It's one of the reasons why I think the library is absolutely a critical partner in just this vision of the engaged learner, because the world I think we're moving into has learning objects that not only are great for Dartmouth, Harvard, Stanford, whatever institution, but frankly shareable and part of a larger movement, resources that can be deployed without being repeated. And I think we're going to be looking at ways of discovering how we leverage each other's successes, how we leverage each other's content, how we make it findable, how we make sure that we keep the experience of the student at our forefront without essentially pricing them out because of our commitment to them.
That whole example of like post-production, and I've done a lot of production in my life too, and it's sprawling, right? So isn't really a real-time answer you have is like 001 in the basement of the VAC building, where every desk has a microphone and a speaker, and you've got cameras, and it's in real time. And the students are controlling the content and moving, like all these things you're talking about are happening, and then just get all the post-production out of the way. It seems as though, because that is kind of what the direction we're going in, right? Is where you want to take this conversation or this education, make it accessible, and then the excitement then I think can come out of being in that dynamic environment digitally, maybe not physically, and then also because it's happening like that, you can go in and your intelligent being can strip all the stuff out that you want and have it over your coffee the next morning if you're not going to watch it in real time. So I mean, are we going in that direction, or are we going in the post-production direction? Like, you know, I mean, that model of, you know, doing 9 hours of content to boil down to one or whatever that becomes, also strips it away from the students, you know what I'm saying, the things you're talking about, being in the students' hands. Like, so can you talk a little bit maybe about that? Does that seem like where you're headed, one of the places?
I mean, I'll say that I don't think we know the answers, right? I mean, I think we know what our goals are. We know our goals are active and experiential learning in every class, right? And we know to get there, we're going to have to take some risks. We're going to have to experiment. We're going to have to do things that are maybe a little outside of our comfort zone. But we're confident about doing that. We feel like we have this incredible model here at Dartmouth, which is other folks can't replicate. You know, we have the faculty who write the books working closely with our students. That's a great model. So we feel, Alan and I feel incredibly fortunate that we're in this position to work with all of you to experiment and innovate. I mean, I hope you guys pick up some of the excitement around all this, because it's really cool stuff, right? So, Naraya, do we have time to wrap it up? One more question.
So I like to question assumptions. So the one assumption that we've made here is that we cannot make the classroom small, like a seminar. Dartmouth has figured out a model that works. Great teachers, great students, put 15 of them in a room and great things happen. How impossible is that? Could the innovation be make that scale? There are so many resources that go into supporting these larger classrooms. Suddenly you need a learning management system. Suddenly you need support librarians. Suddenly you need microphones in every seat. You don't need any of that with a classroom of 15. Is that an option? One thing I remember hearing is, oh, now that computer-generated graphics are so advanced, we're not going to have actors in movies anymore. And movies will be cheap because we can just create them in a computer. And then you look at what is the budget of Avatar, or what is the budget of the latest, movies that use these advanced graphics, and they're huge. They have to hire hundreds of animators and blah, blah, blah. So I'm just questioning our assumption. What would it actually take for Dartmouth to scale the model that we already know works?
Yeah. So I think it's great to question every assumption, right? And that we want to create a campus environment where we can question all of those assumptions. From going around and looking at colleges, I have a daughter who's a junior in high school. We went and looked at the smallest colleges, like really small, like 800, 900, and they still have classes of 50, 60, 70, 80 people. My sense is that just the numbers to be able to have every class only have 8 or 10, right? It's that, we can certainly, it's a great thing to ask, and I know President Hanlon's talked about bringing kind of different types of faculty and different types of degrees. I think these are great questions. But I think that utilizing technologies and new team approaches has to be part of that answer. It might not be the whole answer, and I'm sure there'll be very many answers. This is not a one-size-fits-all approach. But we know that we can hopefully use new technologies and new methods to get us where we want to go. And what you're saying, I think, is a long-term kind of vision, which I think is terrific.
I'll just add, I think one of the things that I find myself thinking about coming back to Dartmouth after 20 some odd years is, how do we give Dartmouth a sense of place on the internet that is as unique and characteristic as we have here in our physical campus. And I think the strategy of working towards a classroom of 12 works fine in a world where the internet and the kind of global opportunity of conversation isn't at the forefront. But I think that so much of what we're looking at in the future is incredibly compelling global content that's not only a product of what gets built, but frankly, of the people that we put in touch with each other, right? And so Dartmouth has extraordinary reach in terms of its networks into global communities. Are we going to take advantage of it? And another way of saying that is, I really think we have to combat being insular in terms of the way that we approach this question, because I think the future is in permeability and really opening up the classroom to the world.
Nariah, do we have time for Paul's question? Yep.
Isn't what we're talking about here not just for the classes of 50 to 60 or 100,
yes,
but also for the classes of 10 or 15?
Yeah, and we think if you build an infrastructure and you build ways of doing that all of our faculty can hook into these new resources and these new ways of thinking. Yep.
I just feel like the analytics aspect of it is so powerful, whatever.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right.
Well, first, please join me in thanking Josh and Alan for their work this afternoon. So just a couple of points. I want to really, thank Alan and Josh for inviting us into a conversation. That's what this entire series is really about, to get us all thinking and making suggestions and positing ideas or questioning our assumptions about any of the priorities that President Hanlon or others have outlined for the institution. So I want to invite you, one, to continue letting others know about the series. The entire schedule is posted on the President's Office webpage. It's being updated regularly. We are adding new sessions for spring term, so be sure to check that. We usually offer each session twice in a day, so during lunchtime, but also in the evening from 6:30 to 7:30. So if you know folks who couldn't make it during the day, but are around in the evening, particularly students, invite them to join us. We are taping almost all of our sessions, live streaming some, so I invite you to also check on our webpage for the links to those afterwards. Usually give us a day or so to actually get them posted. And we are partnering with Improve Dartmouth to ask several of the questions that Josh and Alan have here today, and each session will be posted there. So it's a place to add other thoughts, comments, or ideas. And we look forward to seeing you sometime soon. If you have other
Could I get your name?
Jared. J-A-R-E-D. Bennett.
How's it going? Not too bad. How's the campus going?
CT.
Good? What's your affiliation?
I work in the IT department at there. Yep.
Are you by any chance a graduate or?
I'm not. Nope.
That's all right.
Thanks.
So it's funny that I didn't make it. I'm good at your So good to see you. Nice to see you. Take care. Okay. So I'm gonna go with that and then she and I will come back. Yeah, no, I would. I don't know. I get it. Yeah, like fun. I love remind you. Yeah, exactly. Cool. Thank you, Amy.